Okay, what I want to explore today is the phenomena of dissociation and confused ambiguity and ambivalence. Now, we as the conscious mind are focused on ourself and a certain part of the world. The part that fits within the lens of current consciousness. This is what we can see. This is what's out there. This is what we can see. Now, when we look inward, this lens is focused on the inner world. And when we look outward, this lens is focused on the outward world. And to a certain extent, there's a fractal correlation. That which is within comes out. The bud emerges from the seed and blossoms. The psyche emerges from the bud and blossoms and co-creates and participates in an outer world that to some extent mirrors the inner world. Now, one of the things that's very interesting about culture or cults is that they have what's called an event horizon. Things are happening in the world inside and out all the time. But there's certain things that get amplified and other things that get crossed out, denied, ignored, other things that don't even have language. For example, if you think about the seed of a feeling, the seed of an image, this doesn't entirely make sense, meaning, what do you mean? What do you mean by the seed of an image, the seed of a feeling? Well, it doesn't make sense because it's below the cult horizon, meaning you can go through the entire spectrum of our culture without ever spending a single formal hour studying the science of feelings, the science of images. Now, in technology, you'll study the science of images through pixels, but what about the seed of an image? This is the point. It's below the cult horizon. You ask 1,000 people in our culture, what's the seed of an image? What's the seed of a feeling? 90% or more will give you a blank stare. What does that mean? Is there a seed to an image? Well, obviously, an image comes out of somewhere. Obviously, a feeling comes out of somewhere. Well, metaphorically, that would be its seed. So where does it come from? Well, in an emotionally illiterate culture, we don't know. In a psychologically illiterate culture, we don't know where it comes from. You ask a rationalist, materialist, reductionist scientist, where is the seed of an image? They don't know. They'll say it's meaningless. It has. What are you talking about? Let's talk about something that the cult discusses, such as the strength of a steel bar. We know that because the cult pays attention. And so you have certain things that are below the cult horizon. And you have certain things that are below the individual ego horizon. I've never thought about that before. And there's a multitude of things that are far more interesting and important than the seed of an image or the seed of a feeling that we don't talk about in this culture. If you ask 10 people in our culture, if you ask yourself, what are 30 things that my partner could do for me that would make me feel totally and completely and fully loved? I've asked this question to literally dozens of people around the world. It's below the cult horizon. No one has had a ready answer. Some like the question, some don't even like the question. It's like, gee, nobody's ever asked me that before. And yet, what do we say is the most important thing? We say it's love. We say it's happiness. Well, what creates the most happiness? Being deeply and fully and sustainably in love creates the most happiness. Feeling a sense of survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, pleasure, anticipation of a beautiful future. It doesn't get much better than that as a human being. Now, to not know the answer to that question is absurd, but it is culturally below the horizon line, the line of common discourse, and it is below the line of many relationships. Now, we get as far as what do you want? But that's a different thing than saying, what would I have to do and how would I have to do it so that you would have an exquisite feeling of being deeply and fully loved, in the understanding that in the science of feelings, that there's a correlation between the environment on the outside and the feelings on the inside, that feelings are like a thermometer, and that every human being is capable, at least at birth, at feeling deeply and fully loved. And that there's a certain environmental algorithm that releases those chemicals into the body, that releases those feelings into consciousness and says, that's it. You are deeply, fully, and totally loved right now. For some of us, it's orgasm. But what about beyond? What about the sustainability? How quickly do those feelings dry up, for example, if someone, if a sexual partner has sex with somebody else, or when the orgasm chemicals fade? What is the daily life? What is the daily routine? The ritual, the dance of co-creating a feeling of deeply, fully, and totally loved. Do we know how to do that? There is an environment that does it. Science will tell us that. A bacteriologist will say that there is a culture in which every living organism will grow. There's a tissue culture in which the AIDS virus will grow, and there's a tissue culture in which the AIDS virus will die. There's a tissue culture in which in which any number of virus, chickenpox, bird swine flu, there is a culture in which happiness grows. There is a culture in which joy grows. There's a culture in which deep feelings of totally and fully loved grows. But it's below the cult horizon. It's below the horizon where many of us turn our attention. And so that's the principle of the cult horizon, of the consciousness horizon, that everything up here is above conscious, we're aware of it, we see it, we can process it with our conscious mind, but everything down here is on the shadow side. It's probably one of the reasons why The Dark Side of the Moon was such an epic Pink Floyd album. This idea of what's going on outside of consciousness, behind the lens that our physical eyes can see. The dark side of the moon is still there. And what I want to suggest is that the human psyche is refracted into 1,000 different personas. And so when we're on a sugar high, we have this persona. When we're on a sugar withdrawal, we have this persona. When we're jogging, we have this persona. When we're jogging and listening to a news story we really like, we have this persona. When we're talking with a friend on our cell phone, plus trying to text, plus trying to drive in traffic, we have this persona. And right after a beautiful lovemaking, we have this persona. That every environment induces a pattern of thinking, feeling, choosing, speaking. That's part of who we are. It induces a pattern. Now, the question is, what goes on the dark side? What goes on out of consciousness? Now, the first thing to understand is that we as a cult have correlated darkness with evil and bad, and light with goodness and truth and beauty. So there is an overlay, a cultural overlay. In the same way that we have correlated yang, masculine energy, with positive, constructive, be energized, engage, make it happen. Masculine, yang energy as being good energy. And shy energy, sensitive energy, emotional energy, intuitive patterns as, just keep those under wraps. They're not culturally sanctioned. They're on the dark side of the cultural horizon. They're below the line of what gets talked about. No parent in the United States has ever approached me with excitement and said, I'm so proud of my daughter. She's so sensitive. She has so many feminine feelings. She responds, the way that, nature touches her it's more exquisitely beautiful than you've just never seen anything like it. But parents who have daughters who are go-getter, masculine, yang energy, do tell me how many guys are working under her and this and that. And so it's like, yes, my daughter is, is the term for it these days is a badass. My daughter is a badass. And so there you have the cultural emphasis on the yang while ignoring the yin, while ignoring the beauty, the vulnerability, the strength, the meaning of feminine energy. Ignoring the beauty, ignoring that which is on the unconscious side of the cultural psyche. Now, here's the interesting thing with impact. So, and this, of course, is mirrored in the Earth's revolution around the sun. Because in the process of change, in the process of evolution, in the process of growth, be that culturally, be it individually, be it geographically, for there to be life, there has to be this cycle of waking and sleeping, this cycle of sunlight and shadow, this cycle of walking left and walking right, this cycle of emphasizing the masculine, taking it to its extreme of toxicity, that's at least the way unconscious cultures do it, and then switching and pivoting over to the feminine, taking it, perhaps, in an unconscious format to the extreme of toxicity. And in search of, pain is a consciousness exploder. Pain is a consciousness amplifier. So when we get to this extreme point of pain, we want to come back in some way to be able to put into consciousness, which means to put into language. In a masculine culture, there's no acknowledgement of consciousness without language. If you can't articulate it, it doesn't exist. And half the things, if you do articulate it and you're articulating something on the dark side of the psyche, something in the shadow side, something that is taboo, that is not the kind of thing that we talk about in public. That's the cult horizon. The events happen below the event horizon, just like the ships that sail beyond the event horizon out of view, as the curve of the earth takes a ship sailing from the harbor. You watch it from the harbor and slowly it descends beyond the event horizon, beyond the point where it's real to the senses. First, the boat begins to sink, and then all you can see is the mast, the top point of the mast, the crow's nest, until that too sails beyond the curvature of the earth. And it does not exist within the sunlit point of the day. It does not exist. in the sunlit region of consciousness. And so you return attention to that which does exist. The ships that are still in the harbor, the house that's there in view. And away from that which has sailed beneath. And in the natural cycle of anything, a given pattern of energy will move all the way around the circle. Now, we as cultures, we as individuals, interrupt this circle, particularly at dawning and birth. Dawning and birth, when something new is coming up into view of the conscious mind for the first time, when something new, it's beginning to dawn, it's beginning to return from the circle into which it entered. As it's beginning to return to what? To return to consciousness, to return above the event horizon of individual consciousness or group consciousness. As it returns, it harbingers the unknown, it harbingers change, it harbingers some disruption in the known status quo. And every cult in human history has primarily existed to bring order to chaos by fighting that which is unfamiliar, by fighting the unknown. We do it with our best creative inventors. Why is it that Elon Musk has had such a barrage of negative news? If you look at the disruptive element of transitioning a global technology from gasoline to electric, it is a revolution. It is a profound revolution in energy source, from carbon emitting, spewing diesel, etc., to quieter, cleaner electric energy. There is a bizarre, Tesla, the most shorted stock on Wall Street. Constant obsessions about this tweet and that tweet. There is an absurd level of discouragement. If you watch the history over the last 15 years or so, the beginning, the discouragement to do something new, the discouragement that it can't be done. The Wright brothers were fools. The Wright brothers were fools. Who would want to fly in a plane? What would be the purpose? Fools. And so we have this cycle of denial, discounting, and then anger. Go away, go away. Why do you have to come around here? Go away. We have this process of fighting. And then there's a certain depression, because that energy which goes into the unconscious, that goes out of view, some with cycles as long as 10,000 years. Some with cycles as long as 90,000 years. Some with cycles of 10 years, 20 years, 100 years. As these things go out beyond view, we grieve them. They're no longer familiar to us. And then at some point, they disrupt the status quo. We remap the terrain with that which is within the view of the sun, which is within the view of attention, within the view of the established status quo. And we say this is how reality is. And culture promises us, be normal, look like us, talk like us, follow these rules, and you will be safe from the unknown of chaos. We will fight. We will fight to protect you from every new dawn, from everything that is not part of this status quo. If homosexuality starts to emerge in the culture, we'll try and kill it. We'll try and shame it. We'll try and marginalize it. We'll deny it. We won't talk about it at dinner. Okay, fine. We can't kill them. We can't do the fine. Okay, fine. The new status quo is this, but these transgender folks, we've got to get rid of them. And then, fine. There's okay. We'll do this. African Americans. We can't have people being equal, and they've never been equal before, and we just can't have it. It's not the way things are done. So, at one point, it wasn't the way things were done to have slaves. That was adopted rather easily once it turned out to be profitable, at least in the short term. In a capitalist framework, some things are easier to adopt than others. You just have to show that it's profitable. And then it's, of course, any sane, but that's within the capitalist tradition, which is in its current form new. The free market as opposed to closed markets, the free market as opposed to the dictations of a king or a queen, these shifts are new. And everything has a cycle. Everything has a cycle. The cult's job is to stop life in its tracks. The cult's job is to hold on to the present and fight the future and deny the past. The cult is constantly rewriting history. No, that wasn't a big deal. No, our ancestors weren't like that. Let's not talk about this. Let's talk about this part of the past and not this part because it's not very pleasant dinner conversation. So let's not talk about this part of the past. And then the future. It'll be just like the present, just better, bigger, more. It's like now everyone has, 2.5 children. They'll be smarter and bigger 2.5. They'll live longer. Whatever it is, the cult has its fixation on perfecting that which is and fighting that which is being born and denying that which is dying. No, it's not dead. Don't, hold on. Why is it we love these 90-year-olds who come on clearly within an inch of their grave and say, I'm cheerful, I'm going to live for another 100 years. And we say, good for you, good for you. Why is it we do that? As opposed to celebrating and learning from them and looking at how the cult can change based on their wisdom and bringing on those people who die well, who embrace the change, the sailing of the ship beyond the cult horizon, beyond the current frame of consciousness, into the future, into the shadow. When you have a whole and you impose a cult, the cult is by definition dogmatic. It's that which is dogmatic as opposed to scientific. When you impose a cult, its primary function is to create the illusion of security by making it taboo for everyone to look too low or too high, too much to the left or too much to the right. So in the cult, everyone is fine. No one is depressed and miserable. No one is ecstatic with joy. Could we all just agree that we're fine? In the cult, we are not saintly and beautiful and wonderful. In the cult, we are not heinous, evil, this and that, the other. Just be okay. Just be normal. If that's what normal people do, then fine, do it. What do you mean you're bothered by it? That's what people do in this culture. I mean, that's just box it in. And of course, the promise of every cult is to protect us from trauma. Trauma, the overwhelming energy that cannot be processed by the conscious mind, that cannot be processed by an ego that is traumatically illiterate, that is psychologically illiterate, that is mythologically illiterate, that knows nothing about the landscape of crisis, trauma, the landscape of soul and spirit, the landscape of our psyche, that knows so little about the inner world that it's just, we'll protect you from it. We'll protect you from it. We'll have nice little classes in school, and we won't deal with mythology, and we won't deal with the murderous parts within the psyche. We won't deal with the innocent parts, with the transcendent parts within the psyche. We just, how you doing? I'm fine. Good. You're part of the cult. So when you have a cult that is protecting you from the unknown, this is very attractive to a traumatized people. Trauma, those energies that are bigger than the ego can handle alone, those energies and patterns that seem to threaten survival, security, love and belonging and self-esteem, that threaten our survival. That's what a cult helps us manage. If you will just fit in, if you will just fit in, if you will just hide all the parts of yourself that don't fit in, if you will just deny, become unconscious, block out, drink out, cocaine out, if you will just make that stuff taboo, you too can belong to this cult. Now, the fractured cult, the fractured culture, creates the fractured ego in a fractal reduction pattern. We learn that talking about sensitive, vulnerable feelings as a 10-year-old boy gets one humiliated, bullied, teased, ignored, and people get, worried looks. And you learn that, playing with trucks and guns and stuff makes everyone feel very happy because you fit into the box. Then, you shift your attention away from your feelings into guns and trucks, and suddenly everyone's so comfortable because it's going the way it was supposed to go. It was going the way that it's expected. And so you're meeting your little check marks. And if you go into a good college and study algebra, which you're never going to use a day in your life, it's wonderful, wonderful. The perfect embodiment of the cult. And whatever it is, if it's cut off jeans or whatever it is, if it's a startup, just do what's trendy and hip at this time. You'll be rewarded. The question is, what happens with all this stuff that's too high and too low, too much to the left and too much to the right? It goes into the shadow. It goes into the region of the psyche that has walls around it, erected by the cult, erected by the individual, to make everyone comfortable, to meet in this Venn diagram. You see, the cult in many ways is a Venn diagram. It's like, okay, you're this way over here, we're this way over here, you're this way over here, this way over here. There's all this diversity, and we can't think about that. We can't make jokes about it. It's just too complicated. But there's this little area here we meet in the middle. Let's build a cult around the politically correct areas of that and then deny and block off everything else. Now, let's say that you're a young man in this cult, and so you're doing your cult duties. Because if you're doing your cult duties, the persona in you, the part of patterned response that is evoked in any environment, will be given lots of rewards. So you're courteous, hopefully you're handsome, you're thinking about money, very good cult doctrine, you're learning technical skills, very good, very good. You're developing your education. You're getting degrees, little marks on bits of paper, PSD, PhD. You're getting degrees. Very good. So you're doing your cult job, and as you do your cult job, you're doing it incredibly well. And so you're getting more money. People are interested. People's parents are telling beautiful, teenage girls, like, try and marry someone like that. And so you're you're going up in your various strokes of cult-sanctioned activities, you're getting tons of reward. And so, of course, you up the ante. Who doesn't? In a pain-reward cycle, carrot and stick cycle, who doesn't try and maximize the pleasure? We all have the same hierarchy of human needs: survival, security, love and belonging, etc. So who doesn't try and do a little bit more of the things that the cult rewards? Survival, security, love, and belonging. It's all coming. More money in a capitalist culture, more money equals survival. More money equals security of survival, because in a capitalist culture, there's no Fortune 400 list for the 400 kindest people. The most kind people in the planet, they're not guaranteed to live. If a really kind person gets sick, they don't get treated better or worse than a horrible murderer if they don't have money. They have if the horrible murderer has money and the really kind person doesn't, in a capitalist culture, the whole point of a capitalist culture is to focus on money. In a peopleist culture, the focus is on the person. In a kindest culture, the focus is on the currency of kindness. In a capitalist culture, the focus is on the capital. And the person who is appended to the capital becomes valuable because the capital is valuable in a capitalist culture. And so you have the focus so your survival, your security goes up, and then everyone's telling you that you're more important, and all the businesses are so polite to you because you could buy any of the items in their business. And again, your money is more important than who you are in a capitalist framework. People light up, oh, Rolex, oh, he could buy something, let's treat him well. And so, of course, it's nice to be treated well. You have the illusion of love and belonging veiled under the manipulation of performance in order to secure capital. So everything seems to be going very well. However, what's going on the dark side of the psyche, in the underbelly of the denied individual persona? You see, for every part of us that is loyal to the cult, there is a part that is fuck all this. What do you mean bits of paper are more important than human beings? I mean, what do you mean beautiful human beings are being left to die of chronic diseases? This is bullshit. Complete bullshit. So you have the loyalist that's doing what they're told, and you have the anarchist that's, oh, I'm not an anarchist. No, I never, I always pay my taxes, I do this, etc. Because that's what's being rewarded. So below the cult horizon, below the psychic horizon of individual ego consciousness, we deny that which is the polar opposite. You see, because in a spoke of a wheel, in a journey, in a cycle, every bicyclist knows that if there's a spoke up here, there is a spoke down there. A bicyclist does not deny half of the wheel. In that sense, a bicyclist is more sane than a cult in the terrain of bicycle wheels. But within the psyche, the probability field ripples out in a circular fashion. Now, what creates this wonderful illusion of, I'm this way and I'm never that way, is the zoom-in lens of the ego. It's up here. If the conscious lens through which language is processed is up here, everything that goes on down here, the ego can move over here, up here, over here, etc. And this is who I am. I'm here. All that other stuff, that's not me. I'm this part that I see. This stuff that I don't see, it doesn't exist. It's not me. It's nothing to do with me. In the same way that the ego likes to pretend that it is independent of its ecology. Who are you? Well, I'm this body. Are you the trees? No, I'm not the trees. Are you the ocean? No, I'm not the ocean. Are you the... No, I'm nothing. I'm this body. I'm an independent me. And you say, so what's the definition of independence? Well, I'm separate from. I'm my own thing. I do what I want to do. I'm separate from. I decide what this and that and the other. And you say, okay, so let's take away all the oxygen generated by the trees and the plants. How independent are you without oxygen? Let's take away all the liquids from the. How independent are you without liquids? What, you're more than 70% liquids in your own, but you're independent of liquid? Where does the liquid come from? What about your body? Where did it come from? It just popped into thin air? You're you, an independent you? What happened if you delete your parents from the mix before they had you? Do you exist? What about their parents and their parents and their parents? And where did the monkeys evolve out of? And what if the sun just disappeared? Or what if the sun, what is this illusion of independence? This illusion of independence is predicated on a zoom-in lens that ignores 99% of reality in order to focus on this little bit. That after I've breathed all of nature's air, that after I've drunk all of nature's water, that after I've eaten all of nature's food, that after I've created a safe container for my body inside of nature with nature. Houses are made from nature. They're not synthetic. Where do you think dirt comes from? Where do you think concrete comes from? It's all coming from our ecology. And so, you take all that away and the body doesn't last a minute. That's how independent we are. But we can focus on the fact that I chose to watch this Netflix show and I didn't watch this other one. We can focus where we want. We can zoom into these little bits that fit our model of reality. I'm an independent person, or I'm useless. How are you useless? Are you breathing? Are you didn't, your heart isn't beating? No, I'm focusing on the fact that I didn't get a date. So you didn't get a date at this moment in time with this person, and so suddenly you're useless. Yeah, because I'm focusing 100% of my attention on this area that I'm not succeeding. And I'm calling that useless. And since I'm focusing all my attention, I get to say that I'm useless. Are your fingers still working? Sounds like they could be useful, but no. I'm not paying attention to that. I'm zooming in here. I'm zooming in on the area that I'm independent. I'm not zooming in on the area that I'm a coward. I'm zooming in on the area that I'm masculine and butch and I'm not zooming in on the fact that I'm an idiot. I'm zooming in on the fact that I have a PhD and I know this and I'm not zooming in on the fact that 99.9% of reality is not only unknown, but it is unknown. You don't even know that you don't know it. Because reality is really, really big. And you and I are really, really small. And it is the biggest joke around to pretend that I know everything because I have a little smidgen, few little statistics. Oh, I know that there's 7 billion people. I know people. Every single one of those 7 billion people has things that you can't predict. But 7 billion is enough for me. I know people. I know everything. And so we have this little joke, of overemphasizing the known to help us feel safe from the unknown, a symptom of traumatic protection in a culture that creates lots of trauma but doesn't know how to deal with it. So you're doing your hard-working 9-to-5, progressing, getting degrees, staying current, wearing a suit, however uncomfortable. You're doing all your little things here. And you're being highly rewarded. How would you like a company car? How would you like some extra pay? There's so-and-so, doing the loyal thing. He sold more items of blah, blah, blah than anyone else. So this is what we want everyone to be. This is the cult-sanctioned persona. And every time we spend more time and energy doing this, the cult rewards us. But at the opposite side of the psyche, Every time we do something over here, there's some part of us that feels malnourished. Every time that we look at the sunlit part of the planet, we ignore the fact that half of the planet is sleeping at that time and that things are going on over there as well. And so one of the interesting and important things within the psyche, is to understand that much like a tree, if we learn anything from a $4 to $10 billion ecosystem that has created all of nature, that a tree grows out in a balanced direction. And sometimes there are crowded environments where the tree grows out at a 45-degree angle with all the branches leaning this way towards the light, and then it falls over because it wasn't growing out in all directions. Because the light was coming off to the left here, and there were lots of tall trees already established here. And so this tree grew up, and then it grew off at a 45-degree angle with all of its branches seeking hungrily for light. So it didn't grow symmetrically. It became more and more heavy at this 45-degree angle, and there was nothing to balance it out. So it was doing so well, and every time it grew to the left, it was rewarded, and every time it grew to the right, it was shriveled. Those branches shriveled because there wasn't any light. There wasn't any food over in that direction. And ultimately, after being rewarded incessantly for growing to the left, the roots couldn't hold the imbalanced growth, and the tree collapsed suddenly. In a little bit of a storm, it collapsed suddenly. In the same way, we experience with a DSM manual for mental and emotional health that has more than 5,000 diagnoses for the psyche, with no clear integrated theory on integration and healing. It has 5,000 plus diagnoses where people are sick here and they're sick there, and it's like they were doing so well. They worked really hard on their job, and we gave them money, and we gave them praise, and we gave them an apartment, and we did this, and we sent beautiful partners their way and told them how lucky they would be to be with such a cult figurehead. But then they did more. They worked harder. They got better at this little specialized niche of reality, and they got better and better. Soon they were working long, and they got sick. The bicycle wheels stopped turning. Every new opportunity for growth and healing and change was seen as a threat. It's like, no, I won't get my work done. I won't do this. I've got to hold on to what's familiar and rewarded by the cult. And then they collapse, a suicide. It's just because while this part is being nourished, there's a part below the event horizon that's being starved. That every time there's a little bit that grows out and says, would you mind listening to my desperate need at 4 a.m.? You have desperate needs? The top salesperson of this company? Give me a break. I don't want to talk about that. Go back to this one. When you have a dysfunctional environment that only rewards a small part of who we are, we can become more and more top-heavy, more and more imbalanced. Rewarded more and more as we become asymmetrical, as we become toxic. And then one day, a sudden shift in the reality, and like a tree, we collapse, leaning far to the left, and we didn't see it coming. And the cult never sees it coming. And so the cult doesn't warn the people that it's rewarding. The cult doesn't reward the blonde perfect breasted beauties of our cult anymore. The culture rewards the bimbo, the seductress, the this, the that, this, and it develops off at a hard angle. And it discourages so many of the other aspects that are part of the whole psyche. And then this thing called age kicks in. And suddenly someone who's been spoiled and lied to and manipulated and used, etc., for this supposed icon of this perfect body, of course, doesn't have that perfect body anymore. And then suddenly they're discarded. The cult that praised them for this and this and this and this suddenly discards it, and their life collapses. Because without that cult-sanctioned body, people are not lining up to lie and bribe and manipulate and pamper and humor and all of that. And they haven't developed in the dark side of the psyche, in that bit that's below the cult horizon. So what I want to suggest in the purpose of this video is that it is important to understand the role of cults is to maintain the status quo because it is the status quo, because that's what's familiar, because that's what's safe, because the role of a cult is to dogmatically protect us from the unknown, our fear of the unknown. And the journey into maturing, the journey into mastery, is about transcending the dogma of the cult and venturing consciously into the unknown to face the dragon, to face the reptilian brainstem with its terror of the unknown that is equally dogmatic. The reptilian brainstem is dogmatically terrified of the unknown, expressed in a cult that is dogmatically defending and protecting us against the unknown. The truth is that the unknown is neutral. Every brilliant future that we do not have the knowledge to know that we don't know, every brilliant future that we cannot imagine that we haven't imagined, is out there in the unknown. And many of those futures are worth living for, are our destiny as a species, are our destination, are far closer to beauty, truth, and goodness, three triangular points of the same energy. When we understand that intelligence is the efficiency with which energy, time, money, and natural resources transforms into human well-being, we can see how beauty, truth, and goodness all aim at the same pinnacle, the same synergy. That beauty ties in with symmetry, that symmetry ties in with balance, that balance ties in with grace, that grace ties in with efficiency, that the efficiency of transforming energy, time, money, and natural resources into human well-being is intelligent, is beautiful, that we find intelligence beautiful, the symmetry, the integrity of a thought, the integrity of a pattern. We find it beautiful. When we look at a piece of architecture and we see a cohesive theme along vast scales, we call it beautiful because it speaks of cohesiveness. Truth speaks of cohesiveness, the integration between story and physicality. We like it when we come home and there were 6 cookies in the cupboard, and the only person who's been in the house is our 10-year-old daughter. We like it when we come home and there's no cookies. And the narrative suggests that the daughter must have had something to do with that absence of cookies. And when we ask our daughter, where are the 6 cookies? If she says, I ate them, or I took them and gave them to the neighborhood kids, we feel a certain pleasure because there's integration. There's a cohesiveness around truth. Truth has symmetry. This is the language on this side of the mirror. This is the reality being mirrored by language. So, goodness is connected with symmetry. When we understand that intelligence, the efficiency with which energy is transformed into human well-being, is promoted by goodness and is in service to goodness, that well-being, sustainable growth in a healthy pattern is good. Einstein said that the most important question that we can ask ourselves is the universe a friendly place? When we understand fractal patterns, the real question with is the universe a friendly place is human nature. Are we good? Am I good or am I bad? Am I fundamentally a good person? It is a profound question. Because if we think we are bad, then in the fractal nature of reality, the universe must be bad at massive scale because I'm connected to it, and if I'm bad, it's bad. If it's bad, I'm bad. There's no human beings are bad, but somehow I'm... No. That's a delusion, a very shallow delusion. There's a deep part of us below the event horizon that feels unquestionably evil. But that's not very popular in the shadow framework, so it's below the event horizon if we're projecting evil on the rest of the world. And so there's this dance. Beauty, truth, and goodness coming together in the symmetry of intelligence, which is the even balance of the wheel. This means that the poet and the singer is as important as the business and capitalist. This means that the lover is as important as the warrior. This means that when one sends one's young people off to war, another part must be sent off to love, or the wheel gets out of balance. And they must be integrated in a story that has integrity, where the facts have something to do with the reality. No weapons of mass destruction. It's an ugly war. It's an ugly war. It's not pretty when the story does not mirror, does not have a symmetry, a beauty, a truth, a goodness connected. It connects the two, the story and the reality, the pontification and the behavior. We're looking for wholeness, and wholeness is a process. If you think of evolution, it's a period of walking. And if you walk, you lean on the left side, you take the weight off the right side, you move over and you lean off. If you're swimming, you're balancing asymmetry. To evolve, to grow, you take turns being in balance. And if you take too many turns, if you're, for example, rowing a boat, and you're rowing in symmetry, and you're going straight, if you need to curve a little, if you take too many turns in one direction, you go round in circles. You don't get anywhere. I need to try harder. I just need more discipline. If you just keep doing everything with discipline, you get in a circular pattern. If you keep doing everything with surrender, you keep getting a circle. It's this polarity. And we're not taught in a culture that is afraid of change, that is afraid of complexity, that is afraid of the unknown, and is thus afraid of thinking and imagination. We're not taught to engage with complexity. We're not taught. But when we understand just how much of who we are is below the cult horizon, we understand that for every tree that's getting sunlight and reward for stepping over here, for growing out here, for growing more and more here, we're becoming more vulnerable as a species, as a culture, as individuals to collapse. That when we rush off to make money 10, 12 hours a day and don't tend the poet, that we're becoming sick. When we focus on mathematics but not on music, there's a certain part that is becoming sick in the paradigm, that is becoming sick in the culture, that's becoming sick in the school system, that's becoming sick on an individual level. And when there's no symmetry between what we're learning in school and what we need to learn to live a good life, how to have a good marriage, how to digest and transform emotional energy, how to come alive, how to invent and give birth to something that's never existed before, how to think outside the paradigm of one's set, how to master the art of traumatic recovery. When everything that we need to live an excellent and meaningful life is left out of the education program, and everything that we do not need to live a meaningful life is crammed into an education program, there's no beauty, there's no mirroring. And you create apathy, and you create destructiveness. The curiosity and beauty of the teenage mind is turned in on itself in a brooding hostility of self-hatred that reflects the hatred of a cult that would teach its people so little of the skills to live a daily life filled with beauty and well-being, and so much to distract from the dark side of the cult's shadow, from the dark side of each of our shadow, that which is the unknown unknown, that which our cult keeps us so busy frenetically doing up here that we never have time to feel, to think, and to put language, and thus make conscious to bring the ego below the cult horizon, into these domains, into these gardens, the gardens that can bring us balance, the gardens that can bring us symmetry, beauty, truth, and goodness.